Hello and welcome. This is Captain Aquarius coming to you doing business again as Dan First on May the 7th of 2017. Coming to you with the next of the videos in this year's Lunation series. This one devoted specifically to the full moon that is coming on May the 10th or 11th, depending on your location. The chart we're about to explore is in fact cast for Srinagar in Kashmir, in the territory that still at this point belongs to India, even though there is tremendous opposition and controversy and upheaval now between the government of India, which is determined to hold on to this territory, and Kashmiri separatists who want to gain their independence. It is appropriate also that this chart be cast for this part of the world because this full moon that is coming now is one of the most celebrated of the year traditionally, because this full moon in the sign of Scorpio during the month of Taurus marks the holiday that is celebrated by Buddhists throughout the world most joyously in East Asia as the birthday of the Buddha. This is the holiday, significantly, interestingly, which places right within the month when the surge of desire in the world is strongest. The time when the trees leaf out, the animals are frolicking, the lovers are in the meadow rolling around in the wild time. And this is the month that marks the birthday of the one who taught the gaining of liberation through the overcoming of attachment, including attachment to the desires and pleasures of the body. And so, who knows how these things go? All we can tell you is that this indeed is the month when people all through the world are going to be celebrating and reflecting on what the Buddha has meant to us all. We go right to the chart now for purposes of highlighting two particular combinations which are going to be the subject of this video and the one following. Next time on the video I'll prepare for the black moon of May the 24th, we're going to talk in particular about the alignment that you see here with Saturn up in the 9th house in the sign of Sagittarius, in a 120-degree trine with Uranus and Mercury in conjunction in the 1st house, and also in another trine, both of them, with the North Moon's node in the 6th house of the chart. This is the combination, this tremendous grand trine, which will remain in effect really through the middle months of the year, from June all the way into October, even though Mercury, of course, is going to move along through this process, and Uranus will be in the trine with Saturn and the moon's node thereafter. This is a tremendously powerful and advantageous and positive alignment that gives us, because the moon's node represents cohesion in relationships, particularly with groups of people, families, friends, communities, alliances, associations of all kinds. The teamwork for purposes of change and growth and freedom is wonderful this year. However, there is an exam period that we are in now, and we will be in again at the end of the year. And this is defined by the more difficult, challenging relationship between Saturn, who is the pivotal figure again, in the 9th house in the sign of Sagittarius. Look over in the 12th house, and you see the planet Chiron there at 27 degrees of Pisces. This kind of 90-degree alignment, as you may know, is considered stressful or difficult by many astrologers, by many people who are students of astrology. However, I tend to interpret it as a kind of angle of leverage in which the planetary stress between two figures who are not exactly getting along here may provide enough friction to move us in the direction of making changes that may be long overdue. So it will be interesting then to explore the meanings of these two specific planets. And the easiest way to do this is to use some imagery that applies to them. Saturn is the better known of the two figures. You see him represented here in an image that conveys much of his original meaning in the Roman festival calendar as an agricultural deity who specifically represented the coming to completion and fullness at the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, the time on and around December 21st, when the old year faded out through the shortest day of the year, the light was reborn, and the days began to come longer at the time of the winter solstice, and therefore Saturn is connected with this pivotal point in the solar year. Christmas and the birthdays of so many other solar deities are located at this time. Saturn, as you can see in this image too, represents the harvest in everything that that implies. You see his scythe there sitting on the ground, the most common image associated with him, because this represents reaping, gathering in every sense of the term, the bringing in of the harvest, whatever that means. The harvest that grows in the field, the harvest that grows in the heart, the harvest that comes in the consequences of our actions that we will have to face at some point. Inside the basket, fascinatingly, as you see here, there are all the trappings of worldly royalty and office and power, scepters, marshal's batons, jewelry, laurel wreaths, all of these things that people have worn to proclaim their importance in the world, but in time they all wind up in Saturn's basket because he is in fact the principle of time himself. That is why the Greeks called him Kronos, because of all the 7 visible planets, he is the one who moves the slowest, who has the longest orbit, and who thereby represents the principle of time itself, not only as a defining and limiting force in the world, but also, as we see in this next image here, the force that eventually must represent the decay and the completion of living things. As you see him in this picture, Saturn is a decrepit man, and behind him are the symbols of Capricorn, the sign that he rules, and also the young child with the water pitcher, the symbol of Aquarius that follows Capricorn in the zodiac. Saturn has traditionally been regarded as the bringer of old age, sickness, and death, the bringer of limitation, inhibition, blockage, the way in which when Saturn is aligned against us, we are going to have to work against additional obstacles to overcome the blockages toward what we intend. Saturn represents, above all, effort. It is quite common to hear people talk about how Saturn is giving them a hard time. I have even heard experienced professional astrologers say, Saturn is kicking my ass. The fact is, Saturn would never do such a thing. It is beneath his dignity. What Saturn actually does do, as you may know, is to take our foot and pull it upward and backward until it reaches the perfect moment of tension, at which he releases it with the effect that we kick ourselves in ways that are impactful and instructive. There is only one planet in the system who would derive any pleasure from kicking anyone. That is Mars, as you know. But Saturn does not do this. One more image that we see here, as you notice, he is associated also with the principle of wisdom. He is like the Hermit card, as you see here from the tarot, the black-robed, tall, dignified figure who carries in his lantern the light of wisdom itself. Saturn is a wonderful figure for those who understand that there is a connection between effort and outcome, and who thereby are willing to work with him in order to apply for the alliance of his energy with what we intend. It is hopeless to work against him. The only way to proceed actually is, in fact, to work with him, to understand that Saturn is the principle of effort, devoted, disciplined, painstaking effort in the service of our most important goals. When we form our sacred contract before we come into each life, for all we know, Saturn may be the one with whom we are negotiating our next life role, because he is, in fact, the enforcer of the non-performance clause in our sacred contract. If we are doing what we are supposed to be doing, we will find relationship with Saturn a great deal easier than we will if we are trying to work against him. One of Saturn's children, but one that he did not acknowledge, of course, because this was the product actually of an act of rape, is none other than the planet Chiron the Wounded Healer, who is the other planet in this powerful alignment that we are in right now and we will be in again at the end of the year. Chiron is not a centaur. The story of his birth is revealing about his nature and about why it is that he is called the Wounded Healer. He is the product of an act of rape committed by Saturn on the nymph Philyra, whom he pursued, finally caught, and she attempted to escape him by shape-shifting from one form to another, right at the moment when she was transforming from a woman into a horse was when Saturn ejaculated into her and fertilized the new life inside her, which is why the child thus conceived was born as half horse, half human in form, thereby resembling a centaur, but not one of these notoriously drunken, quarrelsome, difficult beings. Chiron was, by contrast, a wise and loving figure. However, he was wounded from birth because at the moment of birth, when he emerged from the womb and Philyra saw that she had just born a child who was horse and man together, she threw the child on the ground and he was wounded from the beginning with this enormously painful rejection by his mother. His identity as the wounded healer is necessarily associated, therefore, with other features of his life. He grew up in the womb, in the woods, I should say, of Thessaly in northern Greece, seeking in nature the comfort and the love that had not been available to him, as it is for most people in family and society. He is said to have invented a number of things: the naming of the constellations in the zodiac and other stars in the night sky, the identifying of the healing properties of herbs, also the identifying of the healing properties of stones. He is said to have also invented the making of musical instruments from the branches of trees, thereby becoming the spiritual father to flautists and didgeridoo players everywhere. He was also an extremely skilled hunter with the bow, as we can see in this other image here. The kings of Greece sent their sons to him to be educated, not in the arts of war, even though Chiron was an expert bowman, but in the arts of peace, in negotiation, communication, medicine, music, the civilizing arts which these warriors very much needed. He is also the figure that was often depicted in his relationship with the warrior Achilles, as you see in this other image here. Chiron suffered a tremendous, incurable wound from one of his other pupils, the great hero Hercules, for whom Chiron made a poison that Hercules could use to coat the tips of his arrows. And one day, as he was coming to see Chiron, Hercules was attacked by a group of centaurs. He shot his arrows at them. One of them missed, hit Chiron in the foot, inflicting an incurable wound because Chiron had not devised an antidote for this poison. The wound was excruciating, and Chiron was therefore in the position of being a divine being, an immortal figure who wanted to die and who ultimately was able to persuade Zeus, Jupiter, the king of heaven, to allow him to die, which must have been a political decision of enormous complexity for the king of the gods. But in the end, rather than actually allow Chiron to die, Zeus is said to have placed him in the sky as the constellation Sagittarius, which is the sign with which he is most often identified. He is depicted here as a figure who looks like a centaur, human from the waist up, horse from the waist down, firing an arrow. And if you track his position in the zodiac, you see that the place where he is aiming the arrow is exactly at the heart of the scorpion. It is not a killing arrow, it is in this case a medicine arrow. And so there are other things that we can talk about as we go along, because we will meet this combination again. But the main thing to see here is that when Saturn and Chiron are in square with each other, they tend to evoke each other's most negative features. The difficulty that people have in coming to healing themselves and healing one another. The difficulty in coming to the point of responsibility, in accepting what one has actually done. This is appropriate to this time now because, as you know, the tide of endless accusation and blaming and lying at the expense of others is at high tide now. This is the kind of thing that we can expect when Saturn and Chiron are at odds like this. When Saturn is afflicted, he becomes fixed and inflexible, incapable of seeing anything new, incapable of doing anything different from what he has done before. And we can see it especially in the chart that we notice here, that Chiron is located in the 12th house of secrets and shadows, so that people are apt not only to hide their own woundedness, to hide their capacity and their guilt for the wounding of others. And they're apt also to devalue and doubt their own healing gift instead of expressing it outwardly for the benefit of others, practicing it internally for the benefit of themselves. And where Chiron in the ninth is, or I'm sorry, not Chiron, Saturn in the ninth is concerned, you can imagine what the implications of this are in the house that relates to governments, courts of law, banks, hospitals, universities, other powerful institutions of wealth, is the planet of the reaper, the planet of the enforcer of the sacred contract. Is it likely that at this time seeds are being planted which are going to come to a rather difficult harvest by the end of the year? You can bet the ranch on it. And so we are going to come back to this alignment later during this series in the near future, also at the end of the year. Soon we will talk about this invaluable trine alignment that will be of such great importance to us in the middle months of the year. But for now, it is time to hold together, to heal and be healed, to forgive and be forgiven, so that we can cohere in a spirit of love and courage and honesty. Bless us all.